Let's start. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Healthy Waves, where we dive deep into the currents of healing, growth, and the purposeful living. I'm your host Avik, and today we have an extraordinary guest whose expertise will leave you feeling empowered and ready to embrace your wellness journey. Joining us is Dr. Cindy Saz. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Cindy.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and that's a really great introduction. And I hope listeners do have a chance to leave feeling empowered.
Yeah, exactly. Lovely. That's really great. But before we delve deep into our topic discussions today, I'll quickly love to introduce you to all of our listeners. Dear listeners, Dr. Cindy is a powerhouse in mental health, trauma recovery, and holistic wellness. So she wears many hats: educator, clinical director, yoga, and spin instructor, and of course, a successful author. So her books, Finding Your Purpose and Finding Your Wellness, are packed with the insights on self discovery, positive psychology, and the practical healing strategies. So, if you have ever wondered, about the science behind EMDR therapy, the role of yoga in trauma recovery, or how to reclaim purpose in life, then this episode is for you. So, grab a cup of tea, coffee, or settle wherever you are. This is a conversation that will shift perspectives and inspire new beginnings. So, why to wait? Let's jump in. Welcome to the show again.
Once again, thank you very much, and I absolutely loved your introduction. I always like when other people introduce me because it does sound pretty cool, the things that I'm able to offer people. So thank you once again for having
Thank
me on the show.
thank you so much. Yeah. So I'll quickly start with uh I mean you have had such a diverse career in counseling, teaching, wellness. Uh, what led you to explore the intersection of trauma recovery, somatic practices like yoga, and the therapeutic methods like EMDR?
Yeah, and that's a really great question. As you mentioned, I do have a long history working as a therapist. A lot of my practice was revolved around like talk therapy. And talk therapy is great, but if I were to imagine, working with someone when I was 14 years old, talk therapy would have not been effective. It would not have been useful. And then someone, with ADHD or any kind of, neuro divergent, talk therapy is not the ideal. And then with that being said, there's so much value in, when you go for a walk or when you, get a nice stretch for your body or when you smile. There's such value that our body has to naturally heal. I felt that it was lacking in psychotherapy, that whole component of the somatic experience. So that's kind of really where I wanted to integrate some of the great learning that I've had the opportunity to come across in my education for my clients. So that's kind of the long answer around why I'm kind of taking such a divergent approach to healing is because there's so many amazing ways that aren't just talk therapy.
Perfect, perfect. And so like when we're talking about EMDR, so EMDR and therapy debunking, many people hear about this and assume that it's either a magic fix or kind of something mysterious. So um, could you break down how EMDR really works and address some of the common misconceptions?
Yeah, so EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. So right off the bat, there's a little bit of misleading information in that EMDR is only eye movement. EMDR looks at using bilateral stimulation, which is this understanding that we have two different brain hemispheres. We have the right hemisphere, which is this hemisphere that looks for our emotions and looks for our creativity, and then we have the left hemisphere, which is our logical brain.
Mhm.
Often, our emotional brain will take over. Our logic brain will shut down. There's many different kind of brain sciences behind that, but if we're talking about the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex is where we do our higher thinking. It's where we do our math and we kind of have those, second thoughts and that kind of stuff. The amygdala is kind of, associated a little bit with that emotion, where when it gets triggered, the emotions take over. So I always tell clients it's really hard to do math or science or have, a really in-depth logical conversation when we're scared or when a bear is chasing us. So EMDR looks at balancing those two brains, and it does that with bilateral stimulation. Research has found that eye movement was a way to kind of tap in to balancing the two brain hemispheres.
Wow.
Yeah, and so there's a little bit more to that. And as I mentioned, it's a little bit of misleading where they say eye movement because you could also have bilateral stimulation and use EMDR with sound. So even having sound resonate from the left ear, right ear, or pulses. So people will hold tappers in your hand, or you could even do butterfly hugs, which is kind of where you tap onto your shoulders or onto your thighs to activate that kind of balancing of the two hemispheres.
Lovely. Yeah. And also like uh in your experience, uh who tends to benefit the most from EMDR? Uh what can people I mean they can expect during and after the process?
Yeah, so in my humble experience, everyone can benefit from EMDR in the sense that it kind of goes to your core beliefs. And so people often think about EMDR for trauma recovery only. EMDR does work for those big disturbing emotions and kind of going back to that, right brain and that emotional brain and how it takes over things. Everyone gets triggered by something. And so if we're feeling that triggers are popping up, whether we're triggered by a breakup or we're triggered by, the smell of burning toast or we're triggered by something that may have had a negative experience in our past, that's what EMDR can help reduce. So if we're kind of seeing things keep popping up in our life that make us uncomfortable, EMDR can work to desensitize and make that not so disturbing. And then with that being said, people could expect, and you mentioned earlier, kind of people think this is magical or like this kind of like hypnosis or kind of thing that happens in the brain. A little bit is magical in the sense that people come in with one belief and people come in with, a disturbing trigger or people come in with a really horrible memory and we'll
Mm.
work with EMDR and they'll leave and they'll kind of be like, I actually feel better. I actually don't feel as disturbed and I actually don't get triggered as easily, which is really magical in healing capacity where it is your brain and your body just kind of finding some ease, which I think is such a magical thing for clients to have.
Mhm. Understood. Understood. And here, like in you incorporate yoga into your trauma recovery work. So
Yeah.
what role does the body play in healing mental and the emotional wounds?
That is such a good question. So you've probably heard the term like the body keeps a score in the sense that all of our trauma, all of our stress, all of our uncomfortable, stuffing of emotions goes into our body. And so our body really is this outlet that, we often talk about illness. And sometimes illness comes from a disease, and this disease comes from not being at ease. So when we're looking at what our body holds, we're meant to naturally like also release. We cry, tears come, and that's part of our makeup of our bodies. Also, with that being said, is that with our eye movement, when we're able to kind of take back control over our brain, that's another way that we tap into our body to help us heal. Another beautiful thing about the body and healing is if you cut yourself, it will heal. It will heal with, eating proper food and taking rest and, drinking water. So our bodies are made to heal. Same goes if we get an illness. Our body fights, antibodies to fight that illness. If we get a broken bone, our body in time will heal that bone. So our bodies are phenomenal and they're there to help us. And that's sometimes what people think that this help has to come from outside. We actually have everything we need within us to heal.
Hmm. Understood. And so also like you have said before that purpose is not a kind of fixed destination, but an evolving journey. So
Yeah.
if you could share a moment from your own journey when your purpose shifted and
Yeah.
how you navigated that change.
I think that's a really fantastic question. And people think of purpose as this like big shining light in the sky. If you think about your trajectory of life, I mean, when we're younger, our purpose really is to kind of get out of school, or this purpose is to, graduate high school, or the purpose is to get your first job, or the purpose is to move up from home. So our purpose does change as we get older. And obviously, when we're older and we've achieved some of those goals, which also kind of intersect with purpose, we kind of start to look other ways. So when we kind of look to see the things that really, motivate us, that's a great way to start to unpack our purpose. Also, when we start to acknowledge what gifts we naturally have, some people are really excellent runners, some people are really good at math, some people are really good at creativity. Those are all gifts that people have that when they kind of follow through on what they're really good at and feel good doing, that's kind of also indicative of a purpose. If we're able to, make a career being an artist, that's fantastic. Some of us are not very artistic. If we're able to make a career of being a basketball star star. That's wonderful. Some of us can't play basketball. So we're all kind of given different gifts and tools that help us and guide us towards our purpose. But at the end of the day, purpose really is what makes us feel good. It makes us feel good. Whether that purpose is helping someone else, it could be, helping someone across the street for that day. That could be the purpose of enriching someone's life. Purpose can be, sharing love. We talk about how in the world, if we achieved all the great successes and we had no one to share it with, what good would those successes be, right? So a lot of our purpose comes from, connection to others and loving others and treating others with kindness, which then in turn makes us feel good.
Wow, wow, that's really awesome. And like you are currently researching mindfulness and self-awareness in counseling. So how do these concepts improve the effectiveness of therapy, and can any individual cultivate them outside of formal sessions?
Yeah. So one of our books, Finding Your Purpose, is definitely a bestseller because I think everyone is on this journey of
Mhm.
finding their purpose. And so it really does connect with a lot of the clients that come in. They feel, hopeless, they feel lost, they feel sad because they don't necessarily know what they're doing with their life, and then they feel angry because they feel like they're missing out. So
Mhm.
this theme of finding your purpose is very valuable, and I think everyone in some way can connect with it. But then what we forget is that this purpose is ever evolving. And so when we talk about having a session or when we talk about, understanding what the goals are for counseling, a lot of it does come back to just, understanding that we are worthy. People in general have worth. Everyone is good enough in their own way. And so kind of going back to this idea of like finding your purpose is really finding yourself. And
Mm.
that's really, a really important part with counseling.
Wow, wow. And like here also, like working with the indigenous communities and the diverse populations. How do you approach cultural sensitivity in counseling practices?
That's an excellent question. I do live in Williams Lake, British Columbia, Canada. So I am on the unceded territory of the Swiftpick Nation, acknowledging that the land that I'm on was colonized and it was never given, it was taken over. And that's something that I always hold respect for whenever I work with my clients, acknowledging that there is a history of trauma and there is a history of colonization. So whether you're in Canada or whether you're in the United States or, any country that you are in, there is, a population group that has been oppressed. And that's something very important to always be mindful of. I'm aware of my unearned privilege. That means that, by being white skin in some communities and some cultures, I have privilege. And that's something that when I'm sitting with someone who may not be the same skin color as myself, being very sensitive and aware of that. Sometimes acknowledging the power in the room when it comes to being the counselor and a client, and just holding that safe space where the client is the expert. The client in my space is I'm not going to tell them what to do. I'm not going to tell them what to fix, and I'm not going to judge. I'm going to be there to hold safe space, respectful space, and really just look at the client as the expert of their own life and, give them the utmost respect that they deserve. And so when we talk about cultural awareness and cultural sensitivity, it's that acknowledgement of diversity. It's that acknowledgement of trauma-informed practice, knowing that sometimes clients will come to me of a history of oppression. They'll maybe be displaced. They'll maybe be, have a long history of residential schools. And that's where, it really is just go at the pace of trust or, go as slow as trust, meaning that, whatever interventions I want to bring in or whatever I think might be best for that client, I'm going to slow it down and start where they're at. And so really going back to cultural awareness and not assuming we're all the same and not assuming that in a negative way, but assuming that in a way that there's no one size fits all.
Exactly. Wow, that's so lovely. And I'll come to your book. So your books cover the CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy,
Mhm.
and why do you think that CBT remains such a powerful tool in the modern therapy? And also, I know it's a back-to-back question, but and how does, I mean, according to you, like how does it complement somatic practices?
Yeah. So cognitive behavioral therapy really means like what you think about is a lot of impacting on your actions and
Yeah.
then your feelings. So thoughts impact actions and impact feelings. That's a cognitive triangle that, it's really hard to say that's not true. We call CBT evidence-based because there's been so many research studies to show that connection between thoughts, actions, and behaviors. Looking at all the leading research out there, when you think a negative thought, you're going to feel negative emotions. When you think a positive thought, you're going to think positive emotions. So CBT will always have a strong foundational underpinning in counseling because it does go back to like what we think about, we bring about. Cognitive behavioral therapy really does resonate with people and when we look to see what they believe about themselves and kind of going back to that purpose, right? If people think that they're living their own purpose or they think that they're not doing what they should be doing, that doesn't feel good. And so when we go to the thought, which is a cognitive, that's a really great place to work with our clients to help them develop, better coping strategies or even to monitor their self-talk. The self-talk of I'm not good enough is such a common theme in our societies that it's important to kind of get to that belief before anything else. So if a client's coming in and if we're talking about, achieving goals or if we're talking about, eating healthy or going, for exercise and sunshine and all these good, tools, if underneath it all they don't feel like they're a good person or they don't feel like they have any value or worth, we can, give all the interventions in the world, but that feeling and belief about self is one of the most important things to acknowledge. You had a second question there, and I don't remember what was the question around CBT and
Yeah. So I mean, I was just asking, like, I mean, how you think that it complements the somatic practices?
yeah, and so kind of going back to somatic, and somatic is what our body tells us. And so, like I was saying, if we're thinking like I'm not good enough, you're gonna kind of hunch your body and you're gonna kind of like go in like this. And then when we're feeling small, whether it's our body language that tells our brain or our brain tells our body, it has a connection. And so same goes for, even motivation. So when we're feeling low and sad and little and like we don't matter, we're gonna lack our motivation and we're gonna lack ambition and desire and even like belief in self. So when it comes to your body, even like pulling your shoulders back and, showing your collarbone, and even this idea of like holding your spine up straight a little bit, this will give you a little bit of confidence. Amy
Mm.
Cuddy did a fantastic research study on power poses, which is another great thing of how you hold your body. So having your hands at your hips and kind of just sitting up straight, this will actually promote self-esteem. And this will promote you feeling like, hey, wait a minute, I can do hard things. And when we talk about the belief that we have and what our body shows and what our body communicates, if we're able to kind of, connect the two where we're feeling good based on how we hold ourselves and what we believe about ourselves in the world, that's going to really help us kind of go through our day doing those things that we want to do.
Mm.
Versus, feeling sad and staying home and not getting off the couch and, sitting in the dark. And it kind of, the thoughts do impact our body.
Correct, correct. So, one of the biggest challenges for many is recognizing when it's time to seek professional help. Now, um, what signs should people watch for, and how can they overcome that stigma that is associated with asking for help?
Yeah, this
Generally,
is a
people
fan
don't ask for help. Yeah.
Yeah, you are asking fantastic questions. So there is this myth in our society that only a counselor we're at the worst wit's end. Like you don't have any other options. Counseling can be anytime that you're kind of confused or not really sure where to go. I wish people would access counselors earlier because there's no stigma, there's no judgment. We all need some type of, sounding board or some type of person who's there with a non-judgmental approach. Therapists and counselors are there to kind of hold a safe space and to let you feel heard. So if you're ever feeling frustrated or sad or depressed or angry or confused or just any kind of big emotion that you don't know how to deal with, definitely seek some support. There's so many amazing interventions and strategies and things out there to help people that there's no need to fight, anything uncomfortable alone. There's so many amazing interventions, whether it is, yoga for trauma recovery or whether it is cognitive behavioral therapy or whether it is eye movement desensitization or whether it is, something like a solution focused approach. There's so many tools and strategies that if you're struggling even a little bit, seek some support. Life can be easier. That's kind of the big thing is that life should feel good. And if it's ever not feeling good, that's where it's just okay to ask for help.
Mm. Understood. Understood. Yeah. So, as a mental health, I mean, as mental health continues to evolve, where do you see therapy heading in the next 10 years?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. So I love working in this field because there's so much research always happening. People are invested in feeling good, and this world is really about feeling good. With that being said, it's really hard to replace a counselor with AI or replace a counselor with a self-help book. There's a part of counseling where you connect with another individual that is this term attunement and this is connection. And so with that being said, I really, know I see a lot of technology advances and sometimes people worry about, AI taking over jobs. Definitely therapy is not one of those jobs that I'm worried about. And I do see that, therapists and counselors are going to get way more great tools to help move people through healing. When we're learning more about the brain, which is such a great thing to learn about, we know such little about the human brain right now. The more we learn, the more we're going to see that it has the capacity to heal, which is going to really help therapists work with clients. So definitely moving towards somatic is what I see the future of counseling and therapy. And then also, as I was mentioning, like integrating body movement and integrating more thoughts with respect to the outcome.
Got it. And also, like, I mean, what's the one piece of advice or wisdom that you hope listeners carry with them after this conversation?
Yeah, the idea that there, this too shall pass. This is a really great statement to make in the sense that whatever you're going through, whether it's good or it's bad, that tomorrow's another day. And that's the hard part that people don't always understand, that whatever you're going through in this moment, research suggests that a feeling, like an emotion, is really this like chemical explosion in our bodies. It actually lasts about 6 seconds. So if we feel angry or if we feel sadness, if we feel, jealousy, or if we feel something that comes up, if we acknowledge it as a feeling and that it will pass, that's going to give us a little bit of hope that, hey, wait a minute, good feelings are on the way too. Whatever is kind of feeling dark and dreary, it's kind of this idea that the sun will shine. There will be another day. And that's kind of what advice I want to hold on to anyone with is that whatever you're going through right now, whether it's seeking support with a counselor, whether it's just waiting it out for that sun to rise, or whether it is exploring your thoughts to see if, hey, wait a minute, I can change what I'm thinking to highlight a strength. To highlight something that someone who loved me once told me that I am good enough. And that's kind of a really great thing to leave with is that everyone is born good enough. We're all born to be, loving, compassionate human beings on this earth. And if we kind of move into that authentic self of loving, that feels a lot better. And not only does it feel better for us, it'll feel better for those around us. So if we can kind of lead with anything, it's to love yourself and know that you're worth love.
Correct. That's so lovely. So, Dr. Cindy, I mean, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, warmth, and the practical tips with us today. And I have to say that you have shown us that healing is not just about addressing the mind, but it's a holistic journey involving the purpose, connection, body, everything. So, for the listeners, like if you are inspired by today's discussion, check out Dr. Cindy's book, Finding Your Purpose and Finding Your Wellness, to continue exploring these themes. And as always, healing and wellness aren't the destinations, they are a continuous evolving processes.
Mm.
So take a moment today to reflect on one thing that you can do for your well-being and start with something small. And if you found today's episode helpful, please share it with someone who care about it or you care about that person. So let's spread this healthy waves all together. And until next time, stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep riding the waves of growth. So till then, thank you so much.
Thank you.